Hello everyone and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James and on this channel I do reviews of both music and movies along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you then please leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. And well, time to address the very awkward elephant in the room. It has been a little bit since I've made a video. It's been almost 3 months now since I've made a video. And originally I had promised that my top 10 best TV shows of 2025 was going to come out. Unfortunately, a lot of life events got in the way of that happening, specifically just the busyness of my work, and I also ended up breaking my arm while playing tennis, so that sort of put me in a place where I just wasn't ready to record videos because I was recovering. I'm still sort of in the recovery process right now, although I am slowly but surely getting better. I am excited to be back and finally do a little bit of catching up on things that I wanted to talk about, but just never really got the chance to. And that does mean I'm going to be bringing back some more short review segments for both movies and music, and then I'll be getting into more individual reviews as more movies come out. And I am still going to hold true to what I said last year, being more consistent with my reviews, but also making less of short review segments and more just individual one-offs because those tend to work better for me. But for all this catch-up that I've got to do, I am going to do some short review segments, and we are going to be starting off with music today. I've got 7 albums on the docket to talk about, all within varying range of quality as well as recency. There are some that are as recent as just this late March, but others being as far away as February. So let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about 7 different albums that I have heard in the past couple months. And first, we're going to talk about an album that I have actually been anticipating ever since I first discovered this artist with her single Dance, which came out earlier this year, and that is Slayyyter's album, Worst Girl in America. Now, before I heard this album, I actually did check out her previous album, and I actually found it to be a really solid piece of dance pop. In fact, a very fun one, with definitely the biggest highlight of it being the very slick production as well as Slayyyter's very confident vocal performance. The lyrics weren't necessarily anything to write home about, but when you've got a fun dance pop album, I think that that is okay. I did think that Dance, one of the singles for this new album, in fact I believe it was the 4th single, was actually a step up from pretty much every song on that previous album. I just really loved this one, and it did seem to have a little bit more commentary going on about in it, with the idea of maybe there being a little bit of hollowness in the party scene and in the dance scene, but that hollowness is sort of what Slayyyter is attracted to. It's a place where she can sort of let go and be herself, and there's this whole story going on about this person that wants to get to know her better, but she doesn't really care about that much. It's a very interesting commentary that I think was showing maybe that she was going to have a little bit more to say on this new album, Worst Girl in America. And ultimately, I am pleased to say that that is the case. This is basically an improvement on her previous album in pretty much every way possible. Very consistent with not many negatives in it at all. And I do think that that single Dance is one of the easy highlights. It also makes sense as sort of an intro to the album. It sort of gives you the main theme of the album, which is the idea of, you know, the dance scene is fun and there are times to have fun in it, but there's also a sort of pervading darkness in it that can be unavoidable with some of the emptiness that can go on and giving too much into the materialism and vapidness that goes into the dance scene. Sometimes Slayyyter plays into it intentionally so on this album, but then she also draws back in other places on the album, also intentionally so, and I think it creates a very interesting balance where we get a rather stark reality of what can happen when you buy too much into the very dark parts of the scene by the ending track. Yeah, I really like Dance, and then after that, we just get track after track after track of just pure dance fun. The first half of this album is much more, I would say, the fun dance aspect of the album, where we get much more of the club anthems and the jams, whereas the second half of the album includes more of the thought-provoking content where there's a little bit more commentary going on. That's not to say it's entirely absent from the first half, but I will say that even though I do like the more thought-provoking lyrical content in the second half, the first half, its fun aspect can't be denied, and it's honestly my favorite part of the album. Just so many bangers coming one after the other, from Beat Up Chanel to Cannibalism to the wild experimentation that goes on technology. Just a really intriguing song that was so much fun for me to listen to. And then you've got Yes God, which is, oh my man. Now this is a song I will say that where the commentary starts to come in. This one is actually talking about a sexual assault that occurs presumably within the dance scene, and Slayyyter is calling out this man that has committed this, and it creates a very intense song that almost has a metallic flair to it. This one could well end up being my favorite on the album. It is just so powerfully executed and is a genuine banger. I love Slayyyter's screams on the song. The intense metallic flourishes are awesome. And yeah, it is just a really powerful song that it really stood out to me from the first time I listened to this album. This one, dance, and old technology were definitely the highlights of the first half of the album. And I have to highlight once again, this was the case with the last album too, but I think it's cranked up to 11 here. The production on these songs is so good. I am absolutely impressed with just how immaculate the beats sound. Now, I do think the second half of the album is maybe a little bit weaker, but it doesn't start off weaker by any means. I really like the change that happens in Unknown Lovers, which is maybe the most accessible song on the album next to Dance. I would say this one is much more of a almost acoustic pop leaning song with some still electronic elements in there, and it sees Slayyyter reflecting on a relationship that she had where she realizes she didn't really know the person that well at all, and maybe that was because she didn't want to know the person that well because of her personality of wanting to live in the dance scene mindset. I think this is the first part where we see that little bit of vulnerability coming out with her. I also really like Saint Loser. This is another huge highlight for me. This one almost has a rock dance flair to it, which is so much fun. This one definitely is one of the catchiest on the album, and just the pervading beat that goes throughout it is a whole lot of fun. And the closer, Brittany Murphy, is a very powerful track that stands in pretty stark difference to the rest of the songs on here. It's still danceable, no doubt. It still has the electronic production, but it is a much darker, more story-driven song about this girl who ends up taking her own life. And it almost seems that Slayyyter can relate to her in some ways, because this girl also doesn't really want people to notice her or care about what she's going to do. She just wants to sort of leave the club, which is more symbolic of leaving the world behind without leaving much of an impact. It is a pretty heartbreaking song, and I think a pretty fitting one to end the album on, with more of a warning of how you need to be careful when giving into this materialism. Now, this album isn't entirely perfect by any means. I do think that there's a couple of misses on the album. I don't necessarily love Old Flings, and while What's It Like to Be Liked is an interesting cut that I do think plays into the themes of this album, this one probably stands out to me the least and does feel a bit underwhelming. Have a sort of ending track before we get into a genuinely great closer with Brittany Murphy. But overall, this is a really good album. I would highly recommend this. Even if you aren't a dance pop fan, I think there's something you might like here. I think there's almost something for everyone here. It's definitely got some risky and weird moments, but I sort of love the weird moments on here. I think they're some of the best on the album. And the accessible moments will definitely shine for people. There are so many great highlights on here. Definitely could be a top 10 album of the year for me. This album is awesome. Strong 4 out of 5 stars for me. Next up, I'm going to discuss Harry Styles' newest album, Kiss All the Time, Disco Occasionally. Now, honestly, whereas I had a decent amount to say about Slayyyter's album because it has a lot going on, I really don't have much to say about this new Harry Styles album. I still have to say that I think he peaked with his debut, and he has gone worse and worse since. His sophomore is still pretty good as well, I think, but after that, I just haven't really cared for what he's done. Harry's House did not grab me at all. Kiss All the Time is a little better than Harry's House. I do think it has more style and more flourish to it, and its embracing of sort of 90s British pop does work in Harry Styles' favor, but I just don't find it to be that interesting. I don't find it to be a very revealing album. I feel like Harry is really drawn back most of the time, and the moments where he is being more vulnerable are the best on the album, so it's sort of unfortunate that those moments aren't that interesting. I think one of the more vulnerable moments on the album is actually one of the singles, American Girls, where Harry is seeing all his friends getting into relationships, but he seems to be unable to do so on the same level. There are some other good songs on here. I do think Pop is a genuinely fun track, probably my favorite on the album. I really like the production on it, and it's one of the few that lives up to the disco part of the title. I really don't think this album is that danceable at the end of the day. And I know a lot of people don't really care for Aperture, but I did find it to be an intriguing enough lead single. It was very different for Harry Styles, and I sort of respected it for how weird and out there it was. I'm not sure that it has much of an impact on me, but I did like it okay enough. And I do think that the closing song, Carla's Song, as well as Coming Up Roses are both genuinely pretty good ballads. Ready, Steady, Go also can be pretty fun and a rollicking good time, but is a little basic. But overall, this album just really didn't do much for me. There aren't any songs that I would say are painfully bad or anything like that, but most of them just don't do much for me. Paint by Numbers is a song that comes and goes without leaving much for me to think about. I think that Dance No More is, just sort of forgettable. Season 2, Weight Loss, is a terrible title and probably the weakest song on the album. I just didn't find anything fascinating to latch on to here. And overall, that's the feeling I get with this album. There's not much to latch onto at all. Like I said earlier, Harry Styles feels a little bit like he's distancing himself from the listener, and I just don't feel much from the album. It feels like he's a long time away from Sign of the Times on his first album, which is still probably the best thing he's ever made, both on One Direction and solo. It's unfortunate that he's never really been able to reach that peak again. I know he has the potential to do so, it just doesn't seem that he's capitalizing on it. This is an okay album, but once again, not much to say about it. 3 out of 5 stars from me. Oh, I feel bad about how I'm going to be a little bit more critical of this one, but it's only because he's so talented. And I'm going to be talking about the newest album from Luke Combs, The Way I Am. Man, this one was a huge letdown for me. Definitely the biggest disappointment of the year so far. I really like Luke Combs. As someone who isn't generally the hugest country fan, although I've been giving it more of a chance lately and I've found more and more acts that I like, Luke Combs is one, within the mainstream scene at least, that really stands high for me. He feels so genuine, and even though he has undeniable success, I still feel like he's been able to stay humble and stay who he really is and not lose himself to the Nashville industry. So I have a great deal of respect for him, and I've generally liked all his albums. This one, though, this one is a pretty big step down after, I think, the 2 really good albums, both Getting Older and Fathers and Sons, which was a pretty unique pivot for Luke Combs, one that I think has gone severely underrated in terms of people talking about it. This feels like his most mainstream album in ways, and yet it hasn't gotten the same success as his previous albums, which is a little telling of what people want from Luke Combs. I think he can make really good mainstream country, but on this album it just feels so lukewarm and safe most of the time. This isn't a terrible album, but it just didn't do much for me, and one of the biggest reasons that this album fails is that it is so long. It is incredibly overlong. I just don't understand why he has over 20 songs on this album. It is ridiculous. There is a lot of fat that could be trimmed here to make this album feel a lot better. One thing I do like about this album is it has more rockable moments. I think that Luke Combs doesn't do many rock country songs, so it was sort of nice to see him do songs like that. I think the first 2 tracks are both pretty fun. I wish that we had more rock moments that didn't feel so basic after that, because these are the 2 that are definite highlights. We do get more fast-paced songs as the album goes on, but a lot of them just don't stand out to me after the first 2 songs. In fact, definitely the first half of this album has some of the biggest highlights, and after that, it falls off pretty hard, although it does have still some okay moments. I really like Alcohol of Fame. I think that, besides the clever wording, it's definitely one of the most powerful on the album, as well as 15 Minutes, where Luke Combs goes into the perspective of someone talking from a jail cell who has life in prison, and they're talking to their mother. This is probably the best song on the album if I had to choose one. I also like the duet with Alison Krauss on Evermine. I do think it's a very pretty song, and it is a late album highlight. The closer, A Man Was Born, is also pretty good and feels like a good thematic encapsulation of the album, as well as the title track. I do like the title track. But man, a lot of these songs just don't do anything at all for me, and they do play into the typical Luke Combs formula, and the more songs you got on this album, the more you can see Luke Combs' formula bleeding through, of where his chorus specifically is almost always structured the same way, where he gives the main melody of the chorus, and then there's just sort of this pause, and then he gives the title of the song in a way that's supposed to leave a ringing impact. But that same idea happens over and over and over and over again to the point where it gets really tiresome, and you start getting tired of the formula and wish he would just vary it up some. There are some songs on here that I just completely don't care about at all. Sleepless in a Hotel Room was a very weak lead single, in my opinion. I didn't feel grabbed by it at all. Felt like a sort of typical breakup song. I think that Daytona 499 is just boring as sin. And yeah, I Ain't No Cowboy is probably the weakest on the album, with just these typical Western cliches in it and very typical Western imagery. Yeah, this album, it is very disappointing to me. I like Luke Combs. I still think he's a fine vocalist, but he doesn't really let himself have a moment to truly shine on here outside of maybe 15 minutes and the opening tracks of Back in the Saddle and My Cat into Saturday Night, where he really lets his vocals soar. But other than that, this album just didn't do much for me at all. It's not the worst album of the year by any means, but it is a very mediocre one. 2.5 out of 5 stars for me. Next up, I'm going to talk about the newest album from A$AP Rocky, a rapper that I really respect and like. He's not one of my top favorites by any means, but I do still really like him and think he does good with just pretty much any type of rap beat he can pretty confidently go behind. He's just very confident in what he does, and he does pretty well with his collaborators as well. And that is the case on this album. Now, I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I do think it's a pretty fun release for the most part, with a couple of glaring exceptions. I'm not going to say the commentary on this album is the most interesting or anything like that, but I do like to see Rocky delving his hands into different types of genres. I really like the lead single Punk Rocky, although I see some people are not a big fan of his foray into punk and feel it's a little bit plastic. I just personally don't agree. I really liked the song and found it to be pretty fun. The music video is also pretty cool. And the chorus is pretty catchy, admittedly, for me. I also really like Robbery with Doechii, a bit of a weird one. Not what a song I would have expected Doechii to be on, as it's very low-key and almost has this jazzy feel in some parts, but I like how strange it is. It is definitely a unique cut on the album. I think Stay Here for Life is probably my favorite on the album, just a really epic song that goes in many different places, and I like Brent Faye as his feature on it. Helicopter is a straight-up banger and feels like definitely one that would do well in a live setting. And the closer, Fish and Steak with Tyler, the Creator, and Jazzy, is also pretty cool. I really do like that song. But there are a couple of negative moments on here. Probably the most disappointing, and what I think is probably one of my least favorite songs of the year, is Whiskey Release Me with Gorillaz and West Side Gun. This one has a disastrous opening that I hate, and it really doesn't pick up from there at all. I just don't really feel like Gorillaz and A$AP mesh well, which is a real disappointment because typically Gorillaz and rap go very well together, and I feel like Rocky does a good job of melding other genres together on this album, but here it is just not working at all. I also think that the title track and Trip Baby aren't that interesting, and No Trespassing didn't really do much for me either. But this is a good rap album overall. I did really enjoy this and found the highlights to be really strong. I think this is a fun one. You should definitely check it out if you haven't. Solid 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. Next up, I'm going to talk about one of my most anticipated albums of the year from one of my top 10 bands, ERRA with Silence Outlives the Earth. Now, I know a lot of people weren't big on Cure, and I will admit that it has shrunk on me more. I do think it is one of their weakest albums, besides maybe Neon, which I do still think is their weakest, even if still a good album. But yeah, it was a bit of a step down. I just think that some people were a little too harsh on it. But I will also not deny that this album is definitely a return to form for ERRA. This is an excellent release from ERRA. Now, is it reaching the heights of their self-titled? No, but I actually do think that this album is a pretty cool sequel to, I would say, Drift out of all their albums. This is a much brighter and more optimistic album, I would say, from ERRA, and I really do like it for that reason. It has so many bright and shining choruses. I think that Jesse really shines on this album. JT is great here too, but Jesse is definitely the shining star. Songs like, for an example, Black Cloud are a great example of this. It's not surprising to me that this one came to be a single because this one has one of the most catchy choruses on the album. Definitely one of the most accessible ERRA songs in general as well. Just feels like more of a rock song than anything else, and more of something that Jesse Cash would do in his side project, and I don't mind that at all. He actually brings his side project vibes to this album in quite a few places, and I think it works very well for this album. Yeah, Black Cloud is definitely a huge highlight, along with the opening track. Stelliform is so much fun. I really think it does a good job of setting the atmosphere of the album. Gore of Being is sort of a classic ERRA song, definitely more of a standard for them, but I think that its genty elements are really well done, and the breakdown is superb, along with the post-bridge that is just absolutely gorgeous. But when the album really gets into its almost surrealistic drift era vibes is when I really love it. This is the case on a song like Echo Sonata, for an example, which is probably my favorite on the album. I did say that this was one of my top 20 favorite songs last year, and I would still say that it's true. It is just so good. I just love the chorus. It definitely feels like a sequel to Luminous. It just feels like you're in a total vibe for the whole song. And the run from Echo Sonata to the end is, I mean, it's just sort of unmatched. I don't think there's a single bad song in that run. I love Lucid Threshold, which definitely feels like something that would fit right on their self-titled. Another huge highlight for me. And Spiral of Liminal Infinity is just so surreal and odd and very different for ERRA. I love how they're just trying, even on an album where they're embracing some vibes of their previous releases, it still feels distinctly different. And Spiral is definitely an example of that, where it feels like you're in a dream and it feels like you're going into this spacious atmosphere. The cool three-part ending is just really works well. The transitions are awesome, particularly the ending 2 tracks, In the Gut of the Wolf being the most intense song on the album, and just loving the guitar riffs on that one, along with, oh man, Twilight and the Reflection of Dreams. The chorus, oh, it is probably my favorite on the album. It is so good. It is so unbelievably good. The only song on here I'm not loving is Cicada Siren, and even that one isn't too bad. It just feels a little mediocre compared to everything else surrounding it. But this is still a superb album. Definitely a huge highlight from ERRA, and a catalog full of highlights. It's crazy that this could be considered one of their best when they have so many good albums. I mean, it's just a huge competition out there, but this one, it stands the test, and it stands tall. Strong 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. Next up, I'm going to be talking about an album from the artist Hemlocke Springs called The Apple Tree Under the Sea. This is a really cool pop album, conceptually very intriguing to me, as it talks about religion in a way that can feel pretty respectful, but also has a certain amount of distance from it. It is very interesting, and I think there's a lot that could be analyzed about this album that I'm not going to do in this short review because it would take too long for me to do, but I do like what's going on here. And there is a lot of fun pop cuts on here as well. I just love the way that synth pop is made very unique here. It sounds very different from what you would typically expect out of this genre. A huge example of this is Be the Girl, which is definitely one of my favorite songs of the year so far. Just such a unique cut, where her voice sort of reminds me of Lauren Mayberry of Churches in the song, which is obviously a good thing for me. I love Churches. But it's also uniquely her, and really feels like a cool way to end the album where she is just fully embracing herself and all her flaws and imperfections. I also love Sever the Blight, just a very intense cut where the synths are really cutting through in strong ways, as well as Moses, which has this appropriately gospel-tinged feeling to it that really just brings you to new heights. It feels like a very ethereal and euphoric song. If there was any complaint I had about this album, I wish it was a little bit longer for its conceptual arc. I think it would be interesting to see Hemlocke dive more into some of the things that she was talking about here, but this is a very good album overall. I really love just how immaculate it sounds. I think the choruses are very catchy. She's a very, very confident vocalist, and I think she just brings something really cool to the table. This is such a cool pop album. I really respect what it's doing, and yeah, not many negative points to point out at all. Not really a song that I dislike. There are just a couple songs that are less interesting than others to me, but this is still a really good album. 4 out of 5 stars for me. And we're ending off with an album from a metalcore band that is sort of considered a classic and a veteran in the genre. One, unfortunately, I have not listened to until this year, and that is the album Love Is Enough by Converge. And I can see why they're so highly regarded and respected after hearing this album. This is only about 30 minutes, but it is 30 minutes of pure, unfettered energy and fury that is hardly ever letting the brakes off the gas. It is just nonstop, and it's such a fun and clearly very well executed listen. This sort of reminds me of the Knocked Loose album that we got a couple years back that I really loved as well. It feels like that same type of energy, just in a slightly different, less intense direction, but still intense nevertheless in its own right. This album has so many memorable guitar riffs and memorable lyrical moments, and yeah, you just can't help but feel that you're just in this album and you can't escape it in the best way possible. From the moment the title track kicks in, you know you're in for a fun ride. Bad Faith is genuinely just awesome. I love the guitar work on that track. It is vicious and brutal, and the ending 3 tracks, particularly the last 2, Make Me Forget You, and probably my favorite on the album, as well as another that is very close to it, and We Were Never the Same. Oh man, both of these are just wildly powerful cuts that really leave an impact on you and make the album reach a whole new tier for me. It is so well done. If it wasn't for those last 2 tracks, this album would be undeniably intense and a very cool experience, but those last 2 tracks bring it just to another level for me. Just so well done. I absolutely loved this. I think this is an album you need to experience it for yourself, especially if you're a metalcore fan and if you're wanting classic metalcore vibes back. This album will give it to you. Converge has another album on the way this year as well, which I'm very excited to hear, and based on the single, it could be a very different vibe from this one, but man, this band is clearly knowing what they're doing. All that is very apparent on here. Strong 4 out of 5 stars for this one, another one that could easily be one of my favorite albums of the year. So yeah, that concludes this episode of Quick Album Reviews. What were your thoughts on the albums I discussed? Let me know in the comments down below. And once again, my name is James, and I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please leave a like on this video, and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. But until then, I will see you all in the next video.